Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. So, Virtuosa has been out for a little while, guys, and I think the entire community of For Honor is coming to terms with how they feel she sits in the cast. What do you guys think? Do you love her? Do you hate her? Do you think she's just okay? Do you think she needs some buffs? Do you think she needs some nerfs? Do you think she's healthy? Do you think she's harmful to the game? What are your thoughts on Virtuosa? Because I think we're all starting to really get a feel for how we like or dislike this character. And I've heard people on both sides of the spectrum. I've heard people say how much they love this character. She's just the best thing ever. She's totally changed the game forever in a good way. And then I've heard people say she's terrible. She's counterintuitive to the meta. She's not fun to play or fight against. She's ruining the game for a lot of people. And you know what? Everyone's entitled to their opinion. If you ask me, I think she's a fun character who brings a lot of heart and a very creative concept to the game, but I do think she needs some minor tweaking because right now I do think she's got some problems that I think need to be worked out, but that's not here what we're going to be talking about. That's not what we're here to discuss, right? I'm here to discuss something totally different. I want to talk about the lore of her. I have some problems that I want to bring up with the lore of the Virtuosa, and particularly Ilaria. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Some of my community has been coming to me lately saying that they feel the lore for Virtuosa, particularly Ilaria, is very weak or rushed, and they sent me several daily order lore tidbits that they found, and I re-listened to the Warrior's Den as well to make sure I was understanding the situation properly. So after reading all these lore tidbits and rewatching the Warrior's Den discussion, here's what I've gathered about Ilaria in terms of her lore. Here's what I know. Ilaria was an orphan girl in Ashfeld who was forced to live off the streets, teaching herself to fight to survive. She developed a bit of a resentment for Ashfeld and its ideologies as they weren't there for her when she needed help, and so she doesn't consider herself aligned with the Knights in any sense, including in their language. Supposedly, the language of Italian, which is what she speaks, is spoken by the common folk of Ashfeld, while the elite Knights speak Latin, so this explains why she speaks Latin and why she's an Outlander and not a Knight. I'll get into that later. I'll get into that later. Trust me, we will.
She's an Outlander. But a strange Outlander, a different Outlander than what we usually do. She has grown up in Ashfield, but has never felt the protection of the Knights. They were not there for her as she was a street urchin growing up. And so even though her outfits are pretty much coming from the inspiration of European Renaissance mercenary groups, she is not a knight because she doesn't believe in the values of the knight because the knights were not there for her when she grew up. And so she is something else. She's an outlander. This is also why she speaks Italian. We wanted to avoid creating a continent that would be Italy, let's say, and that we would never go back to. Instead, we wanted to deepen a bit our world rather than widen it. And so we wanted to have this idea that, maybe the knight elite, they learn Latin and they speak Latin, but people around them, maybe they don't learn this language, and maybe they speak a language that is an evolution of Latin, Italian. So these are some key elements we wanted to bring out in our narrative also, and you'll get some more details about that in lore orders and short stories and all that.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
But moving on. At some point, Cohart the pirate arrived in Ashfeld. He found her and thought she had potential. He took her onto his ship and gave her a life, a home. He gave her training. He taught her a lot about how to fight and survive and how to do her thing, and for a while they seemed to get along. But time went by, and they kind of changed their opinions on each other. Cohart saw Ilaria as an overly arrogant, flamboyant, and showboating pain in the ass, and Ilaria saw him as an overly pessimistic old has-been who blames the world for his problems and simply was using her talents for his own ends. Eventually, the two went their separate ways. Now, Ilaria's fame and capabilities spread far and wide, and many young aspiring women ended up flocking to her, wishing to learn from her and grow in skill and battle style just like her. And in the end, when Cohart finally defeated Vortigern and closed in on his treasure, Ilaria arrives to snatch it out from under him, and now the two are dueling to determine who gets the treasure. I think we all know who's going to win that. Ilaria, she's going to win that, obviously. When has a hero skin ever beaten the hero they're affiliated with? Am I right? I'm right. Now, maybe later we'll get a bit more of the lore for clarity to better explain Ilaria and some of these issues, but based on what we have right now, I do have some thoughts. So let's start by saying this lore has some problems from a historical, narrative, and practical perspective. I think we need to start in those three criteria. Let's start at the beginning with Ilaria's childhood. She grew up an orphan of Ashfeld. No one took her in or helped her, and she had to fight to survive. There are problems with this. Let's start with the historical issue. What did orphan life look like in medieval Europe at the time? Well, orphans were outrageously common in medieval times, especially in the Renaissance during the time of the Black Death, when children were torn apart from parents by disease or by war or just by poverty. So what became of these children? It's true that orphanages didn't really exist yet. In fact, they weren't really a common thing until I'd say around the 19th century. Instead, children were the responsibility of the community. You see, at that point in time, the Christian society of the medieval period was often understood that children were a blessed and protected treasure because it was scriptural. You have verses like Psalm 127, 3-5, which reads, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court." Further, it was taught that to help your neighbors, especially your family, is also biblical. Like 1 Timothy 5:8 reads, "Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." And you have 1 John 3:17, which reads, "But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him?" And lest we forget the classic Mark 12:30-31, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength." The second is love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So love your neighbor as yourself, right? It's scriptural. So with all that in mind, and that being a series of scriptures that the people of the time period would have heard in mass, it was widely practiced that orphans who lost their parents would be taken in by a relative, and if a relative could not do it, then a neighbor would. It was seen as sinful and wrong to deny the needs of orphans, especially when you consider that at the time period, from a practical sense, children were very important in a world of war, battle, disease, and death. You need children to bring about the next generation. If neighbors were positively incapable of taking in a child and there were no relatives, the child would be given to the church most likely and allowed the opportunity for sanctuary or the chance to join the clergy or the convent. Further, a child might be taken in by a noble family or a royal family, particularly if the child had heritage to land or title, meaning that the noble or royal family would themselves have access to it. Ever hear the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child"? That's a medieval concept for sure. So if this holds true, there's no reason Ilaria wouldn't have been given rudimentary care or at least have a place to lay her head unless she actively chose not to be taken in. And this leads to the question of why she holds resentment to Ashfeld if she actively chose not to be taken in. That does beg a lot of questions, doesn't it? But that's the historical and theological issue. I can already hear some people already going to the comments and screaming at me, "But Ashfeld isn't Christian, Raven. Christianity is never mentioned in the lore. The knights worship the Roman gods. You can't judge Ashfeld by the Christian medieval period because the Christian medieval period is not what we're looking at here." That horseshit again. I've already said my piece about the nonsensical absurdity around the very concept of that discussion, but sure, right, let's play that game. Let's pretend that's the case. So the knights don't have the same system. All right. Well then, let's look at it from a practical standpoint instead. Ashfeld is a land perpetually at war. You know, a lot like Rome was for a lot of its ancient history. Struggling to survive. Assuming that literally no one would or could take you in as a result, why are you blaming the system of Ashfeld? Are you actually going to hold resentment to a nation at war that it can't spare a home for you? I mean, here's another thought process. Do you think Valkenheim the Mire or the Wu Lin would treat you any better? You want to know how those historical cultures treated orphans? Vikings historically could adopt children if the patriarch accepted the child and gave it their name, but if they didn't, the child was considered an uncarried, which made them almost second-class citizens. And especially since we're talking about a girl from Ashfeld wandering into Valkenheim territory, what are the odds of a random Valkenheim father saying, "Oh yeah, we'll totally take you in and I'll give you my name"? Not likely. Orphans in Japan were often neglected and ignored. They faced a very harsh reality. While the ancient Chinese did have an orphanage in place around the 6th century, I believe, can you expect a faction far from their home to have the resources to care about orphans? I'm sorry, sweetheart. You don't get special treatment from anyone in a world like this. So who are you holding resentment towards and why? In fact, I'd say that there's narratively a huge contradiction here. The developer said that she's a very cheerful person, a glass half full individual. Does she seem like the kind of person to hold a grudge? Her whole motivation revolves around being the best and proving it. That doesn't really sound like someone who has a lot of disdain or hate. Sure, perhaps she keeps it covered up behind that cheerful smile, I suppose, but we'll be returning to that point in a minute as well. Now, moving on from that, let's ask another question about this. If Ilaria is an orphan in Ashfeld and was neglected, well, it stands to reason she can't be the only one, right? I mean, this is a world at war. Orphans are going to be pretty common for all the factions. So do all orphans learn to fight? Do they just die? It's got to be pretty miserable, yet she's a very happy person. So was she ever miserable? I don't know. Kind of hard to believe in a world like For Honor, but okay, moving on from that. We've dwelt on that too long. We'll come back to a portion of this. Let's move on to the Cohart part. Cohart finds her somehow and thinks she has potential. All right. Well, Cohart is a pirate. How did he find her in Ashfeld? Was he just on shore leave that day? And what drew his eye to her? Just her fighting skill? Well, I suppose that's not that important, but whatever the case, he invites her onto his crew where he teaches her, gives her a jump start in her career, and helps to basically turn her into what she is today. Fine, I can buy that. Then they start to drift apart and grow resentful of each other. Odd again for the happy-go-lucky Virtuosa to be resentful, but we could argue that she has an ego, that's fine, but I gotta wonder, isn't she indebted to this pirate? Didn't he take her in, give her a future, a career, a home? I don't know, it seems odd, but some folks act differently in terms of compassion, so let's let it slide. What I can't let slide is what happens next. She and Cohart go their separate ways, and Virtuosa goes on to lead her own followers. Her own Virtuosa. This is how Ilaria starts the Virtuosas. All these women come to her wanting to learn from her. Her reputation rallies women from all over to her, all of whom want to learn to fight and improve their fighting skills just like her. So my question is, how do they get the equipment to do that? How do they have the funding and resources to get nice armor and weapons for all these women? How does that work? I mean, Ilaria has no connection to Ashfeld. Remember, she's abandoned them. She has no ties to Ashfeld or its ideals or its system. No. We're not taking anything from Ashfeld. They did her dirt. And also, we abandoned Cohart, so we're not getting him to help us out. No, not doing that. I mean, she has nothing from which to draw finances or resources from to provide for these women. So how did she do that? We don't know. It's not explained. Odd, isn't it? But you know what? Let's be nice. Let's offer an olive branch. We'll ignore that. We will ignore that issue. Let's look at the real issue. After she gets her Virtuosa together, Cohart is about to finally get his treasure, and Ilaria decides she's going to steal it from him.
You what?
Why? Why do you want to do that? Do you feel it's owed to you? Do you want revenge on Cohart for something unrevealed as of yet? I thought you both just had a difference of opinion towards the other and decided to go your separate ways. Is there something more we don't know about? Do you want to finance your new Virtuosas, or are you just being a petty nuisance? Now, my theory is that she's stealing it for Chimera to kickstart Chimera again, since the devs hinted that Chimera would be getting some lore soon, and there is a lore tidbit that says that Ilaria has opinions on what happened to Chimera. Hey guys, sorry, Raven Knight here. I had to edit this into the video during my edits. While I was editing the video, I was reading some new lore orders that I had overlooked, and I noticed this, which actually explains why Ilaria went to Cohart to steal his treasure from him. It actually does explain. And I was wrong. It was not because she wanted to finance Chimera or because she wanted to finance her Virtuosa or because Cohart had done something to hurt her in the past and this was revenge. No, it was actually the other option. It was petty reasoning. It was just to spite him, actually. It says that when she found out that he had found the treasure, she suddenly had a flame burning inside of her. She would take his precious treasure from him and prove that she was better than him, prove that she didn't need him anymore. Yeah, that's actually way worse than I was expecting, because based on what we understand, when she left Cohart's side, she started building up her own Virtuosa group, clearly proving that she was being more successful and well off than him. So why does she feel the need to prove anything to this guy? If she thinks she's so much better, what does she have to prove? You know, if he had done something to really hurt her or like really upset her or betray her, I could understand this. But all it says, the only thing we get is she feels resentful that she felt like he used her to get his treasure, and that was the final straw. Well, sorry to break this to you, honey, but you are a member of his crew, and a pirate captain is going to use his crew to get his way. I'm sorry no one told you that employees work for a manager. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, this is actually worse than I thought it was. So understand that I now know better, and I wanted to make sure I made that correction. Thank you very much. Let us continue. But that begs even more questions. If my theory holds true, how did Griffin find her? Why did she join? Did they finance her and her Virtuosa? Why would they do that? How do they have the resources to do that when they haven't had the resources to do anything lately? Why does she care about Chimera? I suppose all of this might be revealed later, and I can live with that, but as it stands right now, Ilaria's lore has several problems, and the biggest ones I can name are these. She lacks conviction, and she lacks motivation. What does Ilaria want? Does she want revenge on those who wronged her, like Cohart or Ashfeld? I still find it hard to believe that she seems the vengeful type. Her personality doesn't reflect that. If you wanted to make her the vengeful type, maybe she could have a bit more of a dark personality. Does she want to be rich to make up for her life of poverty? She doesn't seem money hungry by nature either, so that doesn't work. The only motivation we get about her is she just wants to be the best fighter and have fun doing it. She wants to constantly improve her skill and become a better fighter than everyone else. All right, sure. To what end? If her only goal is to get stronger, all right, fine. What about the other Virtuosa? Are they all just wanting to get stronger too? Where did this desire to become the best come from? You know, if I'm living off the street, struggling to get my daily bread, calling myself the best fighter in the world really isn't my top priority. If I'm being frank, I just see a lot of problems with the lore. So, after naming all these problems, how about I tell you how I would fix it? Yeah, that's right, guys. I thought about how I'd fix it. Watch this. Here's what you do. Brace yourselves. Virtuosa's parents were killed by Horkos when she was young, and her village was burned to the ground as well. She was forced to wander all over Heathmoor, which is why she wasn't taken in by the knights and thus learned fighting styles by observing other cultures and peoples. She was found along the way by Cohart, and he saw a strike of inspiration in her. Another girl down on her luck, another child who's had life throw a lot at her, a child who's just trying to get by just like he is. He sees in her a kindred spirit, so he trains her. He preps her. He helps her grow in strength because, in a certain sense, he thinks, you know what? Life's been hard on me. Life's been hard on her. But if I help her, maybe that'll help me someday too. You know, the whole idea of karma and all that. But eventually, she felt Cohart had no honor to him. Remember, Cohart has proven that he doesn't mind breaking the duelist code if it suits him and betters his own interests. And she felt that's a line too far. She may have witnessed him break a code of honor. And though she may not be a knight, she has her honor. So, despite it all, she says, you know what, Cohart, maybe the reason life has been hard on you is because you have no honor to you, so she abandons him. She leaves. And eventually, she starts to grow some fame as a swordswoman, and this leads lots of women wanting to learn from her. These women may have come from broken homes, they may have been abandoned by their husbands, they may have, been left behind by their factions, and they want to learn from her. That's great, but she lacks the money or resources to provide for their needs. She doesn't have any ties to Ashfeld, and Cohart isn't someone she wants to go begging to anymore, so she goes to someone she thinks might help. Griffin. Now, Chimera is not as strong as it once was thanks to their losses from Horkos, and with the Hatun invasion, they were pressed pretty harshly. But Griffin and her strike up a bargain. If she can help them get the finances they need, he promises her that he'll give her support and resources to grow her Virtuosa. Well, lucky Ilaria finds out that her former boss Cohart is after Horkos' hidden treasure. She says, I will get you that hidden treasure if you support my Virtuosa. Griffin agrees and finances her Virtuosa, and she goes out to fetch this treasure for Chimera. It fixes everything. It's a way to get payback on Horkos for all that happened to her. It explains how she got the resources and equipment to start her own group of warrior women. It explains why she's going after Cohort's treasure and why she wants it. It explains her connection to Griffin and why that might be used for helping Chimera. It explains her happy-go-lucky attitude and not a vengeful, angry attitude. It explains her aspect as a duelist and why she doesn't like the way Cohart does things. And another thing that I really like about this lore that I created is that it explains why she's not a knight without pulling the knight's bad bullshit this game seems so intent on pushing. And no, I'm not letting that go. I refuse to let it go. Why does this game feel so fine with shitting on the knights? Guys, I know I'm a broken record at this point, but it drives me crazy that the knights get shat on so vehemently by this game. If they aren't mustache-twirling evildoers, they're inconsequential old men running an organization that needs women with fucking metal pig pokers to do their fighting for them. Look, Ubisoft, you don't want to give us more knights? Fine, don't give us more knights. Then at the very least, redeem these fuckers. Redeem the knight faction. Look, I'm going to be real. A lot of my community has said this, and I agree with them. There's no good reason Virtuosa should not have been a knight. You should have made Griffin the first Outlander, and you should have made Virtuosa a knight. It only makes sense. And of course, I heard what you said in the Warriors Den. Well, she does not consider herself a knight. She's an Outlander because she doesn't follow or agree with the ideals of the knights because they weren't there for her. Okay, so because she doesn't agree with the ideals of the knights, she shouldn't be a knight. Right, because Warmonger totally agrees with all the ideals of the knights, right? I mean, yeah, she's part of the knight faction, so she must agree with all the ideals of the knights, right? Or Griffin, he obviously agrees with all the ideals of the knights, right? Even though, you know, he walked away from the knights, doesn't consider himself a knight, considers himself more of an outlander, but yeah, he totally agrees with the ideals of the knights, right? Step off with that nonsense. It's bullshit and you know it. Let's be frank here. You just don't want the knights to get any redeeming qualities because they're the easy bad guys. They're the easy villains. They're the big bad crusader evildoers who did all the mean bad stuff in history. So it's just easy for you to make them the bad guys. It's all a bunch of Sorry, I'm fine now. I needed a minute. To better explain myself, final point here, Virtuosa's lore is incomplete. With any luck, they will finish it in a later season, and I'll fill in some of the holes and issues when I hear about it. So if the new season releases lore that fixes all this, great, fantastic. I'll acknowledge it. But as it stands right now, I'm generally underwhelmed and disappointed that she's not a knight. As, like I said, it makes no sense why she's not. The explanation for her disdain for the knights flies in the face of historical, narrative, and practical reasoning, and it even flies in the face of consistency itself, as Griffin and Warmonger both exist as very obvious counter to the concept that breaking from knight ideals means you aren't a knight. There. Does that help? But that's not even the only problem we have with it. We also have the issue of why she wanted to screw over Cohart. How did she get the resources to fund the Virtuosa group that she's creating? What is it that she wants? What is her conviction? What is her motivation? What is the thing that tore her and Cohart apart that makes her want to go back and get revenge and not just move on with her life and do other things? If she really does want to just be the best, why does getting back at Cohart mean anything to her? By that logic, she has to assume he is the best at something, otherwise beating him has no meaning. At the end of the day, there are problems I see with the lore. Is it bad lore? No, just unfinished lore. And with any luck, it will be finished. So I hope that this video explained my take as to why I'm not overly fond of Illaria's lore. Now, some of you may say, well, you know, I like the character, so the lore really doesn't bother me. That's fine. Some of you may say, Raven, the lore doesn't matter. You're fine to think that way. And some of you may say, Raven, I appreciate you sharing this, but I'm going to enjoy the hero anyway. That's fine too. I'm totally fine with all those responses. I just wanted to explain to you guys why I think that the lore here is weak. Ubisoft, if you're watching this, don't know why you would, but if you're watching this, please understand that I mean no ill will to you or your writers. I apologize for going on that rant earlier, but it does seem like the Knights do get shafted quite a bit. This was a character that I think would have been perfect to add to the Knights. I think, honestly, what should have happened... No, stop, time out. I'm going to stop right there. Let's just move on. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.